Eat salt to lose weight. What a great clickbait news article that would be. Eat salt to lose weight. It's actually true though. So a lot of people have become interested in low carbohydrate approaches for fat loss, right? Ketogenic diet being one of the most powerful tools that we can use to lose body fat. When you restrict carbohydrates, your body will begin burning fat. Your body can very effectively and efficiently burn fat, which is stored ubiquitously throughout the human body. We store fat so that we can use it as an energy source when we have calorie deprivation and energy deprivation from the exogenous energy sources. So fat is an effective fuel that we can burn, and the body knows that, and the body stores a lot of it. Unfortunately, most of us didn't consciously understand this until very recently. We thought that carbohydrates were required for health. Carbohydrates were required for performance, and that we needed glucose in order to live. Well, it is true that we need some glucose in order to live. Our body will create the glucose that we need, even in the absence of exogenous glucose. Now, one of the interesting things that happens when we get into a ketogenic state, when we restrict carbohydrates, is that the body seems to, especially in the beginning of a ketogenic diet, really crave and need a lot more salt than we realized we did before. People drop the carbs, and the kidneys excrete sodium. The body loses water weight, you lose the electrolytes with that. Now, exactly why this happens, it's not precisely clear, but it does seem that most people do better on far higher salt intake on low carbohydrate diets. This could have something to do with just insulin, or it could be something a little bit more complex and nuanced. But what a lot of people find, and what I've seen over the years as a very, very prominent thing, when people start a ketogenic diet, a lot of people are not getting enough salt. Everybody concerns themselves with eating as much fat as they possibly can, which is definitely a misleading trope online. It's the, guzzle as much butter as you can in order to lose fat, right? We can burn fat from our plate, the fat that we ate, or from our body. If we want to burn body fat, we obviously shouldn't be chugging a bunch of MCT oil, butter, and other fats in order just to raise our ketones, which doesn't really mean we're burning body fat. Just because we got high ketones doesn't mean we're burning body fat or that we're metabolically healthy. So anyways, what happens in the beginning of a ketogenic diet, a lot of people don't realize that we need more salt. Now, some of the things that can happen when we don't get enough sodium might be actually alarming to people. We've been told that salt raises blood pressure, and this is not true across the board. In a very small subset of the population, there are hyper responders to sodium where their blood pressure will be raised. But the average person doesn't need to be concerned with getting too much salt. In fact, the average person is more at risk of getting insufficient salt. Now, low sodium will cause the excretion of more insulin, meaning a low sodium state can directly result in more insulin resistance and thus unstable blood glucose. Another thing that happens when we have too low of sodium is our body ends up pulling fluids from the blood in order to maintain that narrow bandwidth of electrolytes in our bloodstream. Remember, we need salt, we need magnesium, we need potassium, we need calcium, we need these electrolytes in order to create an electrical current in our body. Which is basically like a giant battery being charged up by the foods we eat, by the environment we're in. Fascinating stuff. So when we get insufficient sodium, we're not able to charge that battery. Our body will not be able to create the energy it needs without sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. So when we don't get sufficient sodium, the body's going to have to maintain those sodium levels in the blood. It does this by pulling fluid from the blood. This decreases blood volume, makes the heart have to pump faster. Some people, when they're low on potassium, magnesium, sodium, will get heart palpitations on keto. They'll get headaches, leg cramps, muscle cramps. But a simple thing that you can do to avoid many of these things in the beginning of a ketogenic diet, many of the associated symptoms that people would call keto flu when you're getting adapted to ketosis, can be avoided just by increasing salt intake. Another thing that can happen is sometimes we think we're hungry when we're just craving salt. And my buddy Marty Kendall, he runs optimizingnutrition.com. He's been working on a really interesting article when he brings up these points. And he actually looks at MyFitnessPal data, looking at satiety and food intake, and he realized that people who are not getting enough salt naturally tend to eat more food, that there tends to be this satiety threshold where when we get enough salt intake, much like protein intake, when we get enough sodium, the body will stop craving other foods and seeking the nourishment from those foods because we're getting the micronutrient we need from that sodium. So very, very interesting. And he pointed out that the recent Pure study, seems to indicate that we have much higher sodium requirements than we previously believed. And this is right in line with Dr. James DiNicolantonio's book, The Salt Fix, which I think is a really fascinating book. I know there's some people out there who disagree, who are on the other side of the coin, but his book makes a very, very strong case, in my opinion, for the necessity of more sodium than we previously believed, especially in the context of a ketogenic and low-carb diet. Now, something that I've been using for a long time, this little trick that I use with clients who are trying to lose body fat, is just teaching them how to regulate sodium intake. If we train ourselves neurologically and physiologically to understand the signals of low sodium, right? Like sometimes people will get a lull of energy midday and they'll think that they're hungry, but just taking like a half teaspoon of salt at that midday point where the hangriness usually strikes can be so freaking helpful. It can drop hunger levels dramatically and increase energy levels. Especially when people are in those first few months of a ketogenic diet when the body's becoming accustomed to it. Now, something, just to throw this out there, just another point of possible confusion, but something that we need to look more deeply into is on a carnivorous style diet, people tend to require less sodium in some cases. Now, some people doing a carnivorous style diet are eating loads of salt, others putting very minimal salt and finding that they don't need as much. Of course, there's going to be variance in individuals, right? If I'm working out a lot, sweating, doing saunas, heavy lifting, high impact activity, I'll probably require more sodium than if I were sedentary. If I'm getting a lot of potassium dietarily, right? Perhaps these people who are eating a lot of very rare and raw meat are getting more potassium that's not being degraded and destroyed by the cooking process. Perhaps these people eating lots of meat, right? A pound of meat is going to have like, I think 16 to 1800 milligrams of potassium. These people eating a higher meat diet are getting more dietary potassium than somebody who might be doing a lower protein, lower meat intake diet. So a lot of these people on carnivore might be requiring less sodium as well. We don't exactly know the ratio of potassium to salt that's required for optimal health and performance. And there seems to be variation depending on how much salt or sodium you're intaking is going to shift the needs for the other electrolytes. Right? Calcium intake, magnesium intake, sodium intake, and potassium intake. All are going to drive each other in certain ways. So this is something that needs to be studied a little bit further, and each individual can do a little bit of experimentation to see how they perform optimally. But something that I see across the board with clients, with people that are trying to lose body fat especially, is that getting sufficient sodium tends to drop hunger dramatically. So if you're trying a ketogenic diet, if you're doing a low carbohydrate diet, or whatever diet you're on, you'll probably find that once you get sufficient sodium, you're not going to be getting these artificial hunger signs, and you just might be improving your insulin sensitivity as well. So in the beginning of a ketogenic diet, I usually recommend people go for about 5,000 milligrams of sodium per day. Now you can achieve that through several teaspoons of salt. Right? Remember, just 5,000 milligrams of salt is not 5,000 milligrams of sodium. When you look at the scientific research, a lot of people have been alarmist concerning sodium over the decades. But this is something that has been debunked thoroughly, in my opinion, and I really do think that it's quite obvious that we have sodium requirements that are often not being met in the standard American diet. And people on a low carbohydrate diet have a higher desire for salt for a reason. All right? Now, sometimes we do want to listen to the body. Sometimes our body has been trained to give us so many shitty false signals, like give me the donuts, or I just want to sleep all day. All right? Our body can tell us things that aren't really true. But if we learn to dial in our physiology and actually pay attention to how we perform at different micronutrient and macronutrient intake levels, we can find a nice balance where we can listen to our body and we can listen to the signaling of satiety that comes from getting sufficient salt. So if you're having trouble with energy generation throughout the day, muscle cramps, if you're having trouble with satiety and hunger levels, and you're just starting a low-carb or ketogenic diet, make sure you're getting enough sodium. You just might be missing out on this important micronutrient that we've neglected and even demonized unfairly. So Marty's article that I was referring to, it's not up yet, but I look forward to it. Maybe I'll definitely share it and talk about it a little bit more when he gets it up. See if there's any points where that are worth sharing, which he usually has a lot. So check out his article when it comes out, Marty over at Optimizing Nutrition. And James DiNicolantonio's book, The Salt Fix, is an interesting read concerning sodium intake. So yeah, if you're learning to do a ketogenic diet, make sure to get enough electrolytes. When you're preparing your own food, salt it. Right? That's one of the amazing things about a ketogenic diet. You're eating salty, fatty, delicious foods. Now, something that we all know is not good is eating high carb with high fat. And high sodium is often one of the tricks that these food producers use to leverage the desire for us to eat these nutrients. Right? You put high fat, high sugar, and high salt in one thing, and that is a recipe for aberrant hunger signaling and us just wanting to gorge and store fat. But if you're on a ketogenic diet, the high salt, not a bad thing. And getting more sodium in might be very, very helpful for many people out there who are just not getting the results they desire or experiencing keto flu, low satiety levels, and low energy levels. So keep it simple. Prepare your own food. Don't eat the junk food keto quest bar crap. Check out my wife's cookbook, the Ketogenic Edge Cookbook, the training manual for low carb, ketogenic, and paleo cuisine, where we teach you how to prepare nutrient-dense, unrefined, whole keto foods. Got a whole section showing you how to make the most nutrient-dense parts of the animal. The organs teach you how to make broth, how to prepare liver and heart. There's a whole section on veggies. It's not just a carnivorous book, even though I'm more into a carnivorous style diet. We show you how to prepare nutrient-dense keto foods, and all the recipes got macros, and they're all fat loss friendly macros. So check out that book if you're looking to make a foundation of food prep habits, and make sure to salt your dang food. So get off the computer, put your freaking cell phones away, kill your Facebook account, smash your television, go out there and live.